This is Mini Geology from Houston, Texas. Good morning, world. Good afternoon, Europe and Africa, Asia. Good night to the other people in Japan. Too early to wake up, California. And here we are talking about geology. Geology? Geology.
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 All right. All right, so here we go. Today we having here students in the house. My very good friend Stefano, here it is, and we're gonna talk about whatever you want to talk about. And right here to Mini Geology at minigeology@gmail.com, MINI Geology, minigeology@gmail.com. You can find us in Facebook at minigeology.com, which is a YouTube channel where we record these radio shows and we upload them there. You can Google Mini Geology and Rice University. You're going to find a web page in there where everything is explained about what this project about geology, what is it about. And you can call us here live at KPFT Houston. The telephone number is 713-526-8737. And we're going to be watching at this complicated board we have in here. If some flashlights are going on, it means that you are calling here. So 713-526-8737. All right, here we are. So Stefano, good morning.
Good morning, Daniel.
Thank you for waking up so much and come and see me. It is so nice to have friends that they pop up early in the morning and they come and see us. Very, very nice. Thank you. And we have here in the house Ethan and Jules. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay, your voice is hot. I like it. Today we're going to see the humanistic part of science. And from far below, this is like the room here is full of stardust. When you enter in here, that's where everything begins from the university, being students. So I see you are studying at Rice University, and you are on your very first year of PhD. Is that true?
Yeah, that's right.
Yep.
All right. So, Professor Jean was used to do, where he was teaching us history, showing the history from below, bottom up. That's what we would like to do today. So we want to look at science, the applications of science, and the pure science from your point of view. Now that you are embedded in one of the best universities in the country, I would like to know your opinion about how is that doing. So here we go. Let's start with your personal life and tell us about your family and your parents.
Well, I'm originally from the Chicago area, and my family, they're all from Chicago too. So my parents live up just north of Chicago now, and I have an older brother, and he lives, I think, in San Jose, California, or somewhere near there.
What do your parents do?
My dad is self-employed, and he does employment arbitration. And my mom kind of helps him out and helps him schedule and edit things, so they kind of work as a team.
Jules?
I'm originally from Oakland, California, which is right across the bay from San Francisco, in the Bay Area. And my mother is also from the Bay Area originally. She grew up in San Francisco. My father is from upstate New York, Rochester, New York. So they're from different sides of the coast, but they met in California.
What do they do?
My father is recently retired, but when he was working, he worked for the federal government as a health insurance specialist, focusing on the Affordable Care Act. And my mother is a Pilates instructor.
I see. So what does it mean economically going to a university, a private university like Rice University? How many fees do you pay per year?
Not that much, actually. I guess that's the perk of doing a PhD, though. So at this point, I know we get a subsidy or a stipend, and then got to pay for, insurance and stuff like that, but not too much other than that.
It's affordable.
Yeah, very.
What about you, Jules? The same?
Yeah, I would say the same thing. Rice has a pretty generous financial package for those pursuing a doctorate, and our costs are fairly minimal considering all the resources we have access to as students. So,
where do you live now, here in the city?
I live in the medical center, so just south of Rice, but quite close to the campus.
Do you rent with some friends?
Yes, I live with a friend that I actually met at UT Austin. He's a PhD student at the University of Houston now in psychology, and we share an apartment. So.
I live in Montrose. I live like 2 blocks from here.
You're a neighbor.
Yeah.
You walk here.
I drove. I was running a little bit late, but
you're a Houstonian, man.
But I could have walked.
And so you rent and you share your apartment with somebody?
Yeah, I share my apartment with another new PhD student, Michael, who was on here last week actually, and we met through a friend of a friend, and it just kind of worked out. Yeah,
and also Rice University is so close. That we can also go there by bicycle, which is something new, something cool here in the city, right, Stefano? That you come from another part of the planet. Stefano is coming from California. He just arrived a few months ago, and we're welcoming here as much as we can. So here we are with him. And, what about parties? Let's talk about parties. How are parties for somebody that is in the first year of the PhD?
So far, I'd say pretty non-existent.
Really?
Yeah. Well, for now.
What does it mean? You don't find them? You need to come here more often.
I guess so, yeah.
We actually have a Halloween party coming up next week for the department under the volcano.
Yeah.
I haven't been there yet, but...
No, wait a second. So I can't believe it. Like, you are studying here and you in Rice, you don't have parties? Stefano, say something here, please.
Do you have a welcome party or something from the department, or...
Yeah, there was
unofficially, of course.
Well, there was an official one.
Okay.
There was an official one. It was like a welcome back barbecue kind of thing, except it got postponed for I think like a month and a half because of the hurricane. So that kind of screwed everything up. As for unofficial parties, I mean, from time to time, but nothing too exciting.
Oh my gosh! So we have to grow up here together. We need to. We know that you were like a radio DJ. Also, tell us something about that. Tell us about your hobbies.
So I was a DJ at University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign for I want to say 3 years, and I did 2 shows. One was an old blues music show, and one was just kind of a talk show where we had people come on and tell stories, and we would just kind of chat. So that was nice.
Are you doing anything similar now that you're in Houston?
I not currently, but I intend to try to get into that once I kind of get my feet settled and kind of figure out exactly how my time is going to be distributed.
Yeah, you have an HD channel also through KPFT that is renting to Rice University. So that's another way to start looking at that. Yeah. What about you, Jules? What are your hobbies?
So, like Eitan, still kind of getting my bearings here in Houston, but I played Ultimate Frisbee in college, and that's when I started playing, but here at Rice I've been playing with the Graduate Student Association intramural team. There's a number of students from the department, their science department, that are on the team as well, and then also students from other departments, so that's been a good way to meet people from across campus.
That's it. And now study, study, study.
Well, being a PhD student is kind of time-consuming, so...
So that's most of your life, most of your day is about studying.
Yeah, I would say so these days.
So what is a typical day of your life?
Well, I guess get up in the morning, read a paper, go to campus, go to class, read some more papers, a lot of papers, and then kind of just keep doing that, get some assignments done, maybe, take a couple hours at night to just relax and then repeat.
Jules, the same? Copy and paste?
Yeah, I'd say it's pretty similar. A lot of reading, and some lab work mixed in there.
Lab work as well?
Yeah.
Yeah, I forgot to mention that. There's some lab work as well.
So tell us, what do you read about? What are your topics? What are you studying?
So I'm hoping to do research related to soil biogeochemistry and specifically pedogenic carbonates. So there's calcic soils that are ubiquitous to Texas, the Gulf coastal plain. And so I'm hoping to use some of the carbonate nodules that are found in the soil to better constrain paleoclimate and what kind of contributions to the carbon cycle there were in the past that are preserved in these rocks.
So when you say in the past, what are you thinking about?
Fairly recently, in terms of geologic time, last few thousand years, so nothing too deep time.
Okay.
And I'm looking at things that are relatively close to the surface in comparison.
So talking about the last glaciostatic cycle?
Yes.
Okay.
So other colleagues work in much deeper time, more in the subsurface, but I'm closer to surface processes, I'd say, and the things that I'm interested in.
And so how do you relate these things that you are studying with the great society? Where is the application, or where are you going to apply the outcome of your studies?
Well, since I'm studying some aspects of paleoclimate, and climate continues to change as a result of anthropogenic effects, humans using fossil fuels, it's kind of, I think it's helpful to maybe look in the past and see how temperature and precipitation were affecting atmospheric CO2 conditions in the past, and then as things continue to change in the future, can we make predictions as to what conditions might be like as well. And so there's sort of that connection, with the advent of climate change.
What about your friends? When you talk about what you study with your friends that are non-geologists, what do they say? Do they understand about what you are doing? Or do they understand anything about the basics of geology?
I think so. They do think it's a little crazy that I spend a lot of time thinking about rocks and rock processes, but I think in terms of climate change, the things I'm working on, that's kind of a hot topic issue that people are interested in, even people that don't engage with science on a regular basis, because I think a lot of people acknowledge that it is something that is happening and will change our planet. So
but how do you explain them that the things that you're studying in the past that are several thousand years from now, how do you explain them that these have anything to do with the present climate change?
Well, I guess people like where I'm from in California, we had a pretty major drought starting in about 2012 and persisted for a few years. And so, people were seeing that there were changes in the amount of water that we were receiving from snowpack and those kind of things due to climate change. And so I feel like things like drought and extreme weather events, hurricanes, those kind of things are things that we're encountering on a more regular basis. And so I think people are fairly receptive to the fact that things are changing, and so it could be important to...
No, I see that point, that they understand what are the effects of climate change, but how do you help them understand that what you are studying in the past, tens of thousands of years ago, when man was not affecting anything in the ecology or the cycles, biogenic cycles, how do you explain that you study may help understand the climate change that is going on today? That is not easy, I think, for people that are not heavily involved in these interconnections of parameters in nature, not to mention the relationship between the past and the present.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the challenging things about thinking in a geologic context is just in terms of geologic time. As I was saying, the things I'm trying to study here at Rice are relatively recent, but it's hard for us to think in. It's hard for people that don't study geology to think in that context, given that our lifetimes are maybe 100+ years. So yeah, I agree with you that that's a challenge.
What does your family say about it? Your parents, siblings?
Well, my dad is actually quite interested in rocks because he studied anthropology as a graduate student, and so he was more on the archaeology side, but there's implications in using geology to better date stratigraphic layers, and then if you have artifacts enclosed in other layers that are adjacent, then you can better determine in time when people were living and what kind of things they were doing. And so geology has the ability to sort of transcend different fields and help other fields of science as well.
I see. You're so lucky. I remember my family didn't really understand the word geology. Even though geology is a word that was invented in Italy, in Bologna. This is in the 1600s by Aldrovandi. He put together the logos, the speech, and the dialectics of talking with the geo and the Earth planet. So geologia was the very first sound of our word geology. Yeah, that was difficult to explain to my parents, not to talk about my grandma. So what about you?
Well, I'm still figuring out exactly what my project is going to be on. Right now, I'm working on a project where I'm measuring trace elements in olivine crystals to specifically from mid-ocean ridge basalts.
Okay. So what are trace elements? What are olivine?
Yeah, I got ahead of myself. Well, okay, trace elements are, if you have a mineral, you have major elements and you have trace elements. And your major elements are the elements that make up the main structure, the network of that mineral. And the trace elements are things that kind of get stuck in there, and
the minorities.
Yeah, things that
we care about minorities.
Yeah. So what do minorities tell you? What do minorities tell me? They tell me about the process and the conditions under which that crystal was forming, and so things that normally, say, wouldn't be incorporated into a crystal. If you see those things incorporated into a crystal, you have a better understanding about maybe the speed that the crystal grew, or if there were a lot of trace elements or impurities in the environment. And so you can learn a lot about that.
I think it's a little bit like social studies, really. If you study the minorities, you understand where you're living.
Yeah.
It is through studying the little tiny things that you understand that there are different parameters that they are having an important role in society or in the growth of a crystal.
Yeah,
That's pretty funny.
If
And
you-
so then you connect these studies with what? You were talking about the ocean ridges?
Yeah, well, for this study, it's really more about the actual crystal growth and the speed of crystal growth. So the location that the crystals come from are less important in this particular study. It's more of a process study.
Okay, I think that you have even more troubles to explain why this is important for the Great Society here. So tell us, why is it important? Why should we care about that?
Well, if we can understand the processes and speeds that crystals grow at least under this condition, then we can apply those ideas to other conditions as well. And that gives us a better understanding of kind of the internal and external workings of the planet. And if we can understand those things better, then we can understand our planet better. And so the applications, it's hard to be specific.
This is more about the curiosity per se of the science, and somebody else will try to apply what is the outcome of your studies.
Yeah, I would say that this particular study is, I can't necessarily say what the outcome could be. It could be a paper that sits around and nobody looks at it for a long time, or it could be something that somebody uses tomorrow. But it's the kind of thing that is adding to the toolbox of understanding the planet.
I like the fact that you mentioned the deep Earth and the shallow Earth. Mm-hmm. So the things that we work on, the things that we see with your eyes, that we touch with our hands, those are part of the upper crust, if not the thinnest part of the external part of our planet. But then we need the connection with the other 99% of the volume of our planet. So that is very important to connect the deep Earth with the shallow Earth, if you will.
Yeah.
I think that already just trying to build up that connection could be like very, very important. So what about your friends? How do you tell this story to your friends?
Yeah, that's a good question.
You start with like 3 beers.
Yeah, at least, you know.
A lot of head.
Usually, so I'm going to be honest, I get pretty excited when I start talking about geology. That's just kind of how it goes. And my friends know that if they get me started, I won't shut up. So they all know the drill. But they're usually pretty interested. I have a lot of friends that study things that I have no understanding of. And so, you know, we talk and they tell me about what they do and I tell them about what I do. But getting it's hard to convey the implications of what I'm doing. So that's kind of, I generally don't go too deep into that part.
Yeah, I see that point. What about the challenges that you have right now, being the first year of a PhD at Rice University? What are the main challenges for you?
Well, I would say I'm still kind of adjusting to the new environment. I'm still kind of like learning my way around like the lab and kind of figuring out how things work in terms of collaboration versus individual study and that sort of thing.
So you mean the relationships with professors and students?
Yeah. I would say I'm still kind of reaching out and figuring those things out.
Or you're instead talking about the logistics of the labs and those things?
I'd say both of these things, yeah.
Okay. So very practical things
Yeah.
that you have to work out.
Yeah. I would say it's it's a very welcoming environment, and so I can't say that I've had too much trouble kind of adjusting so far. Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing is I'm not used to this weather. I'm not used to the weather in Houston at all.
I see.
Yeah.
Well, weather we can't do anything, but for the relationship we need more parties.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Now you're speaking my language.
Jules, what about you? What is challenging?
Well, I guess it's a challenge in a way, but it's not. I wouldn't say it's a bad challenge. Just that I'm new to the department, and so is my advisor. Actually, he's a new assistant professor. He just started this fall. So our lab is still being in the process of being built, and the instrumentation is coming in as we speak. So there has been a little bit of an adjustment just starting out in that we don't actually have our own lab group space yet. So I've been kind of working in other people's labs to get started. And it's kind of an exciting thing because my advisor has myself and then another new student, and so we'll be, sort of the pioneering group getting the lab up and started and getting all the instrumentation working, but there's definitely a time investment that goes with that.
So it's about logistics also. The challenge is in the logistics. We don't have space here. Oh my God, real estate is so bad here. Huh? That is our problem. Real estate, that we don't have footage enough to do what we want. Well, and there are a lot of things that come with that, just the prices of houses and traffic jam. Too many people, the density is so high and it's getting higher and higher in this city. That's why we have Stefano coming here. Stefano, you're quiet.
So going back to your point about being new to the department, are you given like either an official mentor and sort of an experienced student that's been around, or is it up to the professor, your advisor, to take care of that, or how does that work in your department?
Well, your mentor is I'd say more so your advisor. I know typically, I know I am, you're placed in an office with students who are working with the same advisor, so there's a wealth of experience there to draw on, and I've definitely been using some of that.
Yeah, so since my group is newer, there's just two students there, so my advisor doesn't really have an experienced cohort, I guess, yet. I guess that will be us in maybe a couple years. But so our group is generally looking to our advisor for guidance at this point, sort of, since everything's just kind of kicking off. So.
And what is missing now? I don't say what is missing right now because you clearly said that there are some logistics in there that need to be fixed. That it is like an important, scary part of your studies that you need to fix in that. But your previous years where you have been studying, so how many years you have been studying geology? 5, 6, kind of, roughly.
Yeah.
So during this time span, what is that was missing in your studies? What are those topics that you have never tackled because you never had a course, you never had a person that you could speak with about? Is there anything? Like for me, I tell you, I've never been taught the ethics of writing a paper. Where do you write a paper? Why do you write it? On which journal? What a publisher means. Is it for profit? Is it open source? That is one, for instance. So what about you?
One thing, it's kind of similar, actually. One thing that I've never really learned how to do is I've learned how to write, and I've learned how to analyze data, and I've learned how to do all that. But I'd say the thing that I'm struggling with the most is figuring out which data is important, which data in geochemistry you have so much data to work with, and sometimes it's hard to know which data is significant and which data is less significant and just something that is obvious. And I'm still kind of learning how to discern those things. So I had an undergrad research project that I did in Illinois, and I ended up staying on and working in the lab there for an extra year to continue the project. And I'm still kind of putting the research together for publication, and I'd say that's one of the things I'm struggling with.
I like that. It's the opposite. Me being a sedimentologist is the opposite. I have like very few data, and the very few that you have, you squeeze out everything. But I understand now that because I have few data, I need to integrate with other disciplines like paleoecology or geochemistry. So I understand that in geochemistry you have wide spreadsheets with a lot of numbers and formulas, and you really need to understand that. Now, I think that there is a new branch of studies, well, not that new, but the fashion to talk about this big data or data science, something like that, where we need to learn how to handle this vastity of data sets that we have, and what is meaningful and what we can extract from those, because you could extract a lot of things from all the data that you have, but
definitely.
Is it meaningful or it is not?
Exactly.
So that again, it goes into the ethics. So, and when I say ethics, I mean what is important for us among the many things that we can do, among our many behaviors that we may have. What are the most important things? And so, yeah, I see your point. What about you, Jules?
Yeah, I'd say probably going hand in hand with that, just, I guess, data visualization and how we can, I guess, use plots and charts in our papers, in our scientific publications, to display the data in a way that is usable and makes sense, I suppose. I feel like sometimes, like Eitan was saying, there's just a lot of data to be dealt with, and we don't necessarily display it in the most useful and friendly way, so that people who are not necessarily doing the exact same thing as us are also able to understand it and use it and be able to get the most out of their reading of our work.
What you mean is that nobody has really taught you how to do this part, how to synthesize and summarize everything in nice figures to convey the message without many words.
Yeah, I would say that that's something that scientists at all levels probably struggle with, but especially when you're just starting out, I think, as I am, it can be a little overwhelming, and how can you present this in a way that...
So, in other terms, you're talking about communication. You're
yes.
talking about, I mean, we need to understand and to study a little bit better how to communicate way better. And you mentioned several times papers and articles, which means that you are thinking about writing the output of your research in a scientific paper to put it out there. But is that the only way to convey your message and the outcomes of your studies? Is that the best way to do it? Or is only the way in which the protocol works, is the way in which they want us to convey the message? There's no other way than writing papers. It seems that there's no other way to build up on your profession than writing papers in top-notch magazines or journals.
Yeah. I mean, especially in the world of geology, it seems that it's the best way to show kind of the world of people who are doing what you're doing, what you've done, and to put it out there so they can use it. And I can't really think of a lot of good ways to to convey at least specific ideas other than that.
Yeah, but it is also true that at some point now the journals, they want to be leaner and leaner and shorter. So also in those papers you cannot really talk about the weeds of your research.
Right.
You have like a 4-page paper or 20 pages and then 100-page supplemental information.
Mm-hmm. And that's exactly I think why I have so much trouble with what I have trouble with, is because I want to write a 50-page paper, but I can probably only get away with 7 or 8, you know. So what to do with all of those other 42 pages or whatever, that's what I don't really know what to do.
Well, it seems that there's something that we can do in here. I mean, we should pledge to find a new way to communicate, because we already know, even if you are not done yet with your PhD, you already know, because you read a lot of papers, that that's not really the very best way to communicate. There could be many others.
Mm-hmm.
And like, for instance, like this little thing that we're doing here in the radio, we are communicating. We are communicating other parts that they are never going to be written in any paper, because we are communicating your challenges, your fears, your dreams, your goals, and that is something. But I bet that there should be better ways to do it. And I think it is very important to understand among these overwhelming data sets that in which we are sinking, how to determine the most important things. So I would really like to see a course that talks about these topics that we are debating right now here. I would really like and encourage the professors that are listening to build up a course like that. And I'm sure that it already exists somewhere here and there. Just should become a basic course for everybody.
I agree completely. I think there's a really good system in place in, I'd say, every educational institution I've been to, and probably lots of others, to show you how to conduct good research, to show you how to understand that research, and even to show you how to synthesize a lot of that research. But to synthesize it for the public is a different story.
Stefano.
Well, and I think you hit the nail on the head there, which is, I think a lot of the quote-unquote new or alternative communication methods that are coming out, you know, social media, old media, radio, television, I think is, you know, very important for communicating to the public, or sort of to the either non-scientific or general scientific community. But, you know, when we were talking earlier, and Eitan was saying that, you know, his research is, you know, kind of pure science or highly focused on something that only, you know, researchers potentially just in his field or you know, proximal to his field. I think scientific journals remain, at least for now, sort of the best way of communicating that information, because you do, whether it's a short or a long form paper, you do document your assumptions, your data sets, and those are things you can't do in a 12-minute TED talk or something like that, which is great for casting the net wide, but you're not really getting very deep. So I don't know. I mean, I think departments, at least what I've been exposed to, you know, do a good job of focusing on the professional or scientific level of communication, you know, how to practice giving a talk for AGU or GSA or something like that, but they don't really prepare people for, you know, the kind of things that I've seen Daniel do in the past and still do, which is, you know, sort of more public outreach. I think we do some of that a little more maybe earlier in our lives when we're interacting with, you know, high school students, or, you know, we're sort of in the fray, but then you sort of get pulled into the academic institutions, and there's less, I think, local or global outreach, and there's some you know, very good examples that, you know, defy that, what I just said, which is, you know, there are some really good people on YouTube or on or TED or something like that are going out there and really exposing geology and other sciences to the public.
So I have an idea in here, because we as geologists, we all had field experience. We went to the field, I remember so much, and I think that all of you remember your very field experience out there with the professors and a bunch of students and making a lot of noise and not understanding anything about those structures in the rocks. And I was one of those. But I think that it was fascinating, and it still is, that we have the possibility and we have the chance to do these classes, to take these classes. I don't think that many other disciplines, they have the chance to get out in the field and stay for days together with your peers, together with your professors, and building up relationships there. I think that is one of the main reasons why we love geology so much, because we understand the beauty of the relationship among people, and during that, the understanding of that beauty of the relationship, we build up on that. We are less scary, we are more comfortable. We ask the stupid questions that we always want to ask and we can't in class. And that is the moment maybe where we want to add this kind of topics that we're discussing around right now. Because you need really what you call the icebreaker. And those courses, they are icebreakers, I think. They are icebreakers for your career. And you need them continuously, I think. Many professionals, they don't do it anymore, or they beg their managers to go out in the field once a year because they really love the rocks, and really that's not their work anymore. They don't do it anymore. But we should. That is way better than taking this course that they update you on single disciplines by online courses. That's what I think. And what about you? What about your experiences out in the field?
So in terms of, I guess, a cool class field trip that I took when I was a master's student at UT Austin, I had the opportunity to go to Yellowstone and Wyoming for a week with my geomicrobiology class. And so we were studying, I guess, the extent of extreme life that was living in these hot springs and what kind of different microorganisms make a living off of these different types of environments, extreme heat. Some were oxidizing or reducing sulfur to make a living. And so it was an interesting introduction, I guess, to how geology interfaces with other fields such as chemistry and biology, and sort of a neat opportunity to go to a place of geologic interest. And
so how many days did you spend out there?
We were in Yellowstone for around 4 days, and then we also traveled to a cave as well and studied some of the microbial life that was living in that cave. And we also visited other hot springs in Wyoming, so in total it was about a week.
And how many people were there?
There were around 10 of us in the class.
How many professors?
There was one professor.
Okay.
So
what do you remember about the relationship with your colleagues and professor during those days?
There was... Most of the students were fairly, I guess, unfamiliar with the field of geomicrobiology, myself included. It's kind of a niche sort of interest, and so we were all kind of just learning the material and getting familiar with that aspect of geology. There was a lot of data collection that we had to work on as a team, and ended up having a team project that we had to work on together, and so there was just a lot of learning field techniques in the field for aqueous geochemistry and collecting biological samples as well. So,
Peter, what about you? What was your experience out in the field?
Well, if I had to choose one to talk about, I would say I went on a field trip to Scotland to study primarily igneous and metamorphic rocks with a handful of sedimentology thrown in there. And part of the reason I enjoyed that so much is because it was somewhere I had never been before. So while I'm not going to downplay the geology, it was amazing. is the best part. But it was also really cool to kind of experience a new culture as well, and kind of experience that culture in a way that was in conjunction with the geology. So you would go from town to town, and you might end up, somewhere in the middle of nowhere on the coast, because that's where the geology is. And you would see the way that the land and the mountains and all that are kind of incorporated into the local culture, and I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, I think so too. It is another way to add value to this kind of field trips that we take, and I'll never forget the how many things I couldn't understand. Just, like, we go there for a purpose, geologically speaking, so we go to see these things. You go to see maybe how the bacteria they grow there. I go to see how these lamina they form in the rock, and then you go to see how the faults they move, and then you don't understand anything. But still, you're happy. Still, there are so many other parameters that are making you happy, that you're remaining there. You are pushed to move on, to stay the entire day out there. And we need that kind of interaction to go back to the field after studying, and go back and have another look at those objects that we couldn't understand before. Yeah,
and I think, personally, I think the reason that, for me, that field work is so valuable, and I think this probably applies to a lot of people, is that you understand enough to be curious about the things that you don't understand. And when you go in the field, you run into a lot of things that not only you, but probably nobody understands in any detail. And when you run into those things, I think those are the moments where you get not only inspired for specific projects, but inspired just to keep doing geology. You see these things and you realize nobody's ever even looked at these rocks. Like, what are the implications that these rocks could have for the world?
Yeah, I remember, like, one of my best professors about sedimentology, Emiliano Mutti, Mr. Turbidite, he spent years. It was also another generation, and they had more time and less duties, and they had more time to go there. But after spending years and years in the outcrop looking at the rock, he said, I still don't understand maybe 80% of the rocks. I don't know what they're telling me. I really don't know. So yeah, everybody's welcome here to see this big data set that we have.
Well, and I think one thing that has stuck with me from I've done a lot of work in the field, and one thing, just coming from an academic standpoint, building on what Eitan was just saying, is that when you go into a classroom setting, you're typically taught prepared material, and one thing that really, I have 2 or 3 episodes in my mind, fixed exactly. I know where I was in the field. I know exactly which professor this happened with, where like you said, sort of nobody had looked at these rocks before, or really kind of figured it out. And what we would do in a small group, a field trip and a professor, or a field class and a professor, is we would look at an outcrop, and the professor would relay this sort of their thought process in real time. And so there would be a much more of a back and forth of, it gives you an insight into sort of the scientific mind, and somebody would throw out a crazy idea, and especially one professor that we had was very good at quantifying some of these ideas, and so he would look across the outcrop and say, well, if it's this much displacement or such and such, is that process really possible based on what we know in the scientific literature? Or if not, let's go back and check that. And maybe there's an, like you said, an idea for a project might come out of those kinds of discussions. So it's much more of open flow of ideas rather than, you know, I'm going to teach you what I know. So.
And in this part of the geology, the personal part, interrelationship, that really affect my personal life. I think that I think differently because of that, because I'm more conscious about the interconnections and the problematic relationship between causes and triggers, and that really helped me a lot with the relationship with my wife, because I really don't understand her. And I think that this helps me, and I'm way more tolerant now. But, you know, dear wife, I'm a very bad husband, you know that? Anyhow, what about you? What about geology? How did geology affect your life?
I mean, I guess growing up, I kind of always had an inclination, I guess, towards outdoor activities. Did a lot of camping and backpacking growing up, and so I guess studying geology was really eye-opening for me in that when I spent time outdoors after having taken geology classes, I felt like I understood the natural environment a lot better, and just the features that I was seeing, I could understand, at least to a certain extent, the processes that formed them, and it just helped me feel, I guess, more connected with the things I liked to do in the outdoors.
You, Aitan?
Well,
do you think that students and people from the West Coast, they approach geology differently? Like what Jules said, you are like an outdoorsy guy, and that is your connection with the environment, and therefore you think about geology because you see the rocks in the environment, rather than like in here where you don't see anything about that, but you're thinking more about a career, and so you enter into the geology or petroleum geology department or school of mines, where you study the minerals because you know you may have a career, because the nation has an entire continent, a lot of land, a lot of volume of rock where you could extract resources, and therefore there could be a career for you, a job, if nothing else. Yeah. But do you think that is different from where you come from Chicago, from Illinois?
Well, in Illinois, most of the state is pretty flat. Pretty darn flat. You don't have a lot of rock exposure.
But that's what you had for a long time, the highest tower in the world, because it's so flat.
We did. We've been overtaken now, but we're still proud of it, you know. So, yeah, no, I would say... so I don't think as much is attributed to kind of growing up around it and seeing it every day and that sort of thing. But it's more about, I think, at least for me, when I was growing up, I wanted to be an entomologist. I wanted to study insects, and I would like catch bugs and watch them and feed them and then let them go, and that was what I did. That was my favorite thing to do. And over time, you know, my interest developed, and I kind of got more curious about science and all that, and I took a geology course in high school, and that kind of made the extra step and kind of introduced me to the bigger ideas in geology instead of just here's a rock kind of thing. And so I kind of actually started out doing paleontology, and I was doing taxonomic paleontology, and I love it still, and I really enjoyed it, but for me, it was a little too qualitative. And I ended up doing a research project in geochemistry just because it was available and I was kind of interested, and I figured, you know, the worst that happens is I learn what I don't like, right? But I ended up totally falling in love with it, and really just more closely examining the way that things are connected on a much smaller scale and how those things relate to the bigger and even the global scale. And so, yeah, go ahead.
Talking about bigger things, what about when you include there in the big picture? Where is your dream? Where is your dream? Where do you want to go now? What are you studying for? Is there anything that you're dreaming about?
It's a tough one. Well, right now I've always kind of thought, I'm doing this because I want to be able to do research, and I also love teaching. So I think that is kind of, I guess, the dream at this point is to teach and do research and collaborate with my peers and kind of gain every day a better understanding of the world around me and insight into the processes that make everything around us what they are.
Well, so if you want to teach through a different medium, here you have a house. You can come here and help us teach and educate people.
All right.
What about you, Jules? What's your dream?
I guess I'm kind of the opposite. I'm not really inclined towards an academic career. I worked for a couple years after I finished my bachelor's degree for the U.S. Geological Survey as a hydrologic technician, and so I think I would be interested in continuing to do research with an agency like that, hopefully something related to what I choose to do my dissertation research on. But
I see. Even though you have to be ready and flexible, because here things, they change so quickly. The topics, they are chosen by entities that we don't know up there. Funding, it follows those channels. And there's a hyper-dynamic movement now about what we are studying. And I would really like to know that. I would like to have a course with somebody's teaching me why we are studying these topics. Because we think it's just because of our pure curiosity, but that's not true. We are always steered and driven by professors or the literature that we read that we're going into this direction. But why we're going to that direction? It's not more pure curiosity. Anyhow, that is almost all for now, and this is Mini Geology radio show. We are in Montrose, Houston, Texas. We say hello to the world out there, and we are gonna tell all of the listeners that you can write us at minigeology, MINI geology @gmail.com. I hope you can watch some of the videos that are in the minigeology.com, which is a YouTube channel. And this is KPFT Radio HD3 channel. And now we are gonna put on again one of these music of Skip James, Hard Time Killing for Blues. And we dedicate this to our good friend Aitan in here. He was a radio DJ.
Yeah.
And so I hope you can continue doing something similar, that you can come here at KPFT. And we are all volunteers in here. Nobody gets a salary. We do it just for the sake of our passion. You're all welcome. I'm really, really happy that you came in here 1 month after other students, they came. I really call for more students to come in here. If you are close by, University of Houston, the community college, Rice University is already here. UT, why not? If you are coming around, you're here, knock at the door, send us an email, call by phone, 713-526-8737. And obviously, if you want to pledge and help the radio to survive, again, call the radio, write me, and we're going to tell you how you can help, either with your brain, your hands, or your wallet. All right. So, guys, goodbye to everybody, and that's all for now.
Thank you so much for having us.
Bye, Stefano.
Bye-bye.
Ciao.